Welcome to Contradicting the Cosmos, the show where I refute the YouTube atheist, the Cosmic Skeptic. In today's episode, Mr. Cosmic is going to overreact to a very tiny article produced by Answers in Genesis. Let's begin.
Well, here's an excerpt. As a society, we reap the consequences of the unquestioned acceptance of the belief in evolution every day. It breeds prejudice, feeds racism, and perpetuates hate. This needs to stop, starting with us, starting with our children. Find hope, find truth, find answers today. Yeah, no, you heard that right. You just heard an attempt to blame society's acceptance of the fundamental scientific fact of evolution for racism.
No, they just blamed society's rejection of scientific fact in favor of an unsubstantiated hypothesis on perpetuating racism. Racism does not come from evolution, but evolution is a racist ideology. And I may be saying this a lot in this video, but evolution is not fact.
Okay, let's at least give the article a chance. Let's take a look at the example that they give to substantiate their claim. One of the most fascinating stories about the effects of evolutionary beliefs on human relations is the story of Otto Wenger, a short African man from a group of people described as pygmies, who was put on display in a zoo as an example of an evolutionarily inferior race. The incident clearly reveals the racism of evolutionary ideology and the extent to which the evolutionary ideas have gripped the hearts and minds of most scientists. Right. Where do I start? Okay, to me there's two immediately pressing problems with this. The first of which I don't want anyone to misinterpret, but I do think is an interesting point, which is that even if this was true, which it's not by the way, but even if it was true that evolution could somehow prove that, say, let's change it from race, let's say that evolution could somehow prove that blonde people were inferior to dark-haired people. If that were the case, then as horrible as that would be, it would be a scientific fact, and that wouldn't mean that the fact wasn't true just because you didn't like it. But luckily, it's not true, and evolution can't determine whether a person is any more superior or inferior to another, because evolution is not a straight line of worst to best. Evolution is a tree of expanding branches, with no individual branch being objectively any more superior or inferior to another. All I'm trying to say is that even if it were true, which it's not, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to justify this in any way, but even if it were true, that would just be tough. It would be a fact of nature, and you couldn't discredit a fact because you didn't like the reality.
First of all, again, evolution is not a fact. But the Answers in Genesis article is not trying to disprove evolution. They are not arguing that evolution is false because it is racist. They are arguing evolution is false and it is racist. If evolution were true, the idea of calling something racist would be pointless, because you would not even be able to call racism wrong. Evolution subtly puts in people's heads the idea that they are more evolved than maybe some other people. It may only do this subconsciously, but it is still there. You might try to claim that evolution didn't actually make anyone better than anyone else, just different, but if evolution were true, how would you know that? What standard are you appealing to be able to claim that all humans are equal, but all humans are more important than mosquitoes? But of course, I can already guess where Cosmic Skeptic would say to that. He would probably say something like, humans decide humans are important, and mosquitoes decide mosquitoes are important, and the humans are just stronger. So then, in an evolutionary perspective, how is that any different than just being better than a mosquito? And if you can say a human is better than a mosquito in an evolutionary perspective, can't you also just say that one human is better than another? What's stopping you from doing that? If evolution were true, you would have no foundation upon which to argue that racism is wrong. Let's get on with the next clip.
But this leads on to my second point, which is precisely that it's not true. Okay, by arguing that evolution can be used to justify racism and prejudice, you're playing a dangerous game, because let's not forget that evolution is widely regarded as scientific fact by many people across the world, and so by telling them that it can be used to justify racism, that's a dangerous move, Ken. Allow me to illustrate my point by going back to my earlier example of somebody trying to claim that blonde people were evolutionarily inferior to dark-haired people. Okay, imagine that I tried to enslave a blonde person, or a group of blonde people. I tried to put them in a cage and put them on display in a zoo. People would be rightfully angry, but when they came to me with their anger, I could just say, well, it's because these blonde people are evolutionarily inferior to us. And what would people's response be? They'd probably say, well, A, that's not true at all, and B, even if it was true, it would be no justification for keeping these people in cages. Okay, the problem doesn't lie with evolution, the problem would lie with my misunderstanding of evolution and my misunderstanding of the implications of its reality. To blame evolution for Otto Benger's situation is to blame evolution for my enslavement of blonde people. It just doesn't make any sense.
I feel like Mr. Cosmic is not following through on his analogy. If evolution were true, then why would you need justification for anything you do? Especially when Mr. Cosmic himself believes morality is subjective. So who are those people to tell him he can't enslave people? He is appealing to an objective morality that he himself does not accept. Wait, no, I correct myself. He does accept it, he just claims it's not actually objective.
Let's look at the conclusion. There simply is no reason for anyone to assume that they are more valuable than the next person. We're all created in God's image. Isn't it time that we realize that we're all the same? The Bible teaches us, from one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the time set for them and the exact places where they should live. What a great conclusion. We are all the same, and this idea of human ownership is horrific.
And stop right there. Mr. Cosmic is about to strawman very hard. The article was about racism, not slavery. Keep that in mind with the upcoming clips. But as for this one, that was the whole article, basically. It was a very tiny article. Those 3 snippets he showed was the best of the article. Most people would not waste their time on a puff piece that quite obviously does not go anywhere. It's basically just a very long tweet. Or maybe a Facebook post. It is disappointing that Answers in Genesis doesn't have slightly higher standards for some of their articles. But I don't know, maybe they have to have an article every day or every week. That would explain some of them being as short as that one. I don't really visit Answers in Genesis very often.
Right, kids, turn to Exodus 21:20. When a man strikes his slave, male or female, man, Christianity promoting gender equality since the 6th century BCE. With a rod, and the slave dies under his hand, he shall be avenged. But if the slave survives a day or two, he is not to be avenged, for the slave is his money. Now you talk about evolution, but I'm pretty sure that that is justification for the ownership of human beings if I ever heard it. Okay.
Then clearly you've never heard it. That did not justify anything. That was a restriction on how you treat your slaves. And remember, the article was about racism, not slavery. There's nothing racist about having slaves.
Chapter 21, verse 2, I believe. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve for 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go out free for nothing. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. What this is saying is that if a slave has a child, then that child is born into slavery and will forever be a slave to their master. Now, of course, male slaves get released after 6 years, but not the women. God, no, not the women. But if the man decides that he actually quite loves his wife and children and wants to continue seeing them, then he must submit to the will of his master forever.
Isn't context a wonderful thing that Mr. Cosmic decided to ignore? First, oddly enough, I have to bring up the fact again that the article he's responding to was about racism. And here he is talking about Hebrews owning Hebrews. And it's funny, he stops right before verse 5 that says, "And if the servant shall plainly say, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out free." So, right away, it's not just the love of his wife that keeps him there. He also loves his master. And although I do not know the historical context, it seems to me that he does not take his wife with him because he cannot pay the dowry. He was already broke to begin with in order to sell himself into slavery, so he certainly could not afford the woman that he was given. Also, the children are not slaves. I may not have all the historical context, but I can still educate you a little bit on ancient Hebrew property rights. The person who chose permanent slavery gave up all his personal possessions and inheritance to his master. His children, therefore, are his master's children, not slaves. They will inherit property or money just like any other children. For instance, Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's children, they actually got their father's inheritance. Joseph did not inherit anything from Jacob, his father, Israel. All his inheritance went straight to his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh.
Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5. Bondservants, a footnote, or slaves, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ. Look, here is a book which you, on your website, Answers in Genesis, claim is the fundamental basis of everything you do, the foundation of your organization, which blatantly defends the very thing that you're claiming to be acting against. This is overt hypocrisy.
Oh, the irony. Someone who believes in evolution but believes in equality. Someone who will take moral outrage against something that in his worldview is not objectively wrong to then accuse someone else of being a hypocrite. And hilariously, his straw man comes to bite him in the butt, because now he's claiming the Bible defends racism, but all the verses he showed were about slavery, and he didn't even get that part right.